So in this conversation, let's talk about the history of conscious guidance and control. Let's talk about, give people a general overview of who created it, who was involved in that, and to what extent did humans have this skill or technique prior to it ever being formalized.
Yeah, well, that's these are many questions at the same time. Um, well, the way we use the sentence conscious guidance and control originates with one man, and the man is called Frederick Matthias Alexander. He was an Australian actor, and very early in life, he had a problem in his type of work. Is that he was losing his voice because of well, overuse. Because at the time there was no microphone. He had to project his voice into the room, and very quickly uh, he was on the verge of being like somehow famous in Australia, and he lost his voice. So he went to see doctors, and they diagnosed an irritation. Okay, but apart from rest, they couldn't well, give him any solution. And so he reasoned out that he must be doing something for his voice to break like this, because after resting, you would find that at first it would be nice, it would be fine, could talk properly, and then very quickly the hoarseness come back. So he reasoned that something he was doing must be in fact responsible for the detrimental functioning of his vocal apparatus. So that's how the story goes. And very quickly, less than a year, he was back on stage. We know that from records of the time. And not only that, but the next year, he was already touring New Zealand. He was from, well, Australia, and he was touring New Zealand. And we know that at that time, he started to give lessons to other people. And that's quite strange to start as an actor and just after 2 years start giving lesson to people. There is one element that is quite even stranger, because most people have this idea that at that time he was an elocutionist, a person that was teaching vocal development. He was teaching people how to speak and breathe. But there is a very strange account that cannot be doubted, is that while he was still in New Zealand, his sister, Amy Machin, had an accident. She fell from a horse, but her foot kept was trapped in the stirrup. So the horse continued to run for a mile or so. And so after that, you can imagine the state of her ankle and leg after have been carried along by the horse pulling on the foot. So Alexander came back to Australia and straight away took charge of his sister, and he didn't give her a breathing exercise, not at all. That's where things are very strange. Is that instead of uh, well, performing what he should have done, he started to give a lesson in front of a chimney, and these lessons were about going up on the toes. And you must imagine something, is that when a person has had such an accident, there must be pain. There must be uh, fright. I mean, the person must be anxious not to damage the ankle anymore. And going up on the toes, you have to know what you're talking about to teach one person to use the 27 bones of the foot and ankle in order to go up on the toes in a proper way. So this, it sounds as if Alexander already knew how to organize the, well, anatomical structure as a whole at that time. That is 2 years after having solved this own problem. And so we know the idea of conscious guidance and control because very early Alexander started to write about that concept without much explanation, by the way. And the first book he wrote was 10 years later, 1910. And in this book, the book is about conscious guidance and control. So then you get an idea of what it is. So that is uh, the start as we know it in the Alexander technique world. The modern Alexander technique world considers that Alexander is the originator. Well, of course, I'm doubting this story. It's it doesn't sound feasible, so that a person would construct the whole technique as we know it in 2 years' time. And on top, he was a young man, and he was more an actor than a psychologist or a physiologist. Or so very early, I started to imagine that there must have been people around him that, in fact, gave him some ideas or trained him in this idea of conscious guidance and control. So I started to look around and see if there was, well, in writings or anything that would explain where Alexander was at. And well, I had very many difficulties. Even the fact that Delsart said that he was a Delsart teacher when he started his first training course, his first um, well uh, business as an Alexander teacher, as a teacher of breathing and deportment. Um, the books that were available on the Delsart system were absolutely contrary to the idea of conscious guidance and control. So that was very strange. It's only very much later that I discovered that the Delsartism, the books that were written by the American, uh, were in fact a pale imitation of the ideas of the man called François Delsart. And so this idea of conscious guidance and control, as we have to define it some more so that people start to understand what it is we are talking about. Um, because what is conscious guidance and control? What is the object of conscious guidance and control? Of course, is to change the use of the anatomical structure. I mean, how we use the different parts of our organism. So how do we sit? How do we stand? How do we appear? And this is the first thing I need to point out, is that, of course, we are talking about a man that was an actor. So for this man, there are two kinds of movements you can make. There is the movement you make every single day during your daily life, yes. And then there is your business occupation. And Alexander's business occupation was to be on stage. And that makes a fundamental difference. And that difference is important to understand conscious guidance and control. So um, when you are on stage, you are, of course, delivering some message, some verbal lines to the public. But a good actor should have what today most people would call a body language. that is in accordance with the feeling that the character is expressing, or that the character is expressing even though he wants to hide it to another person in the play. So, in this sense, we understand that uh, what the person feels on stage has no value. It's the person is not on stage to feel good. The person is on stage to represent, to in fact express something both with words, but also with a gesture. So that's where the name gesture comes in English, most people understand gesture as an expressive movement, very often made with the hands or with the face. When we consider conscious guidance and control, it is not the case. The actor is considering the whole self. That is fundamental to understand that when Alexander is talking of the use of the self, in fact, there is a difference. He's talking about the use of the whole self. How do we use the whole self? Not that part or this part, not the thorax for breathing, not the mouth for speaking. No, he's interested in how parts are linked together and how the production or the expression is always an expression of the whole. So, the business of conscious guidance and control is to help an individual to change a habit. Most of the time, we start with habits we call physical habits, which is people which are coming to me are coming because they have discovered that when they play the violin, for example, they've discovered that they have a limitation with their wrist, which is it's a local problem most of the time, or they have a problem in the shoulder, which is local, problem in the back or in the knee, or when they squat they find they cannot go down because something is blocking them, and they imagine that it's around the knee or around the ankle, for example. So this is what I call a specific, local problem. But the solution of conscious guidance and control is never local. That's the first. And as an expression that you send to the public is never a part. You cannot, if you make, for example, a facial expression, but your whole body gesture is contrary, people will not see your face, they will see your whole attitude.
And it's also important to remember that he's a stage actor. So this is before close-ups with video cameras. So you had to, your whole body needed to be involved to display an emotion or
Yes.
some kind of thought that the character was having.
Yes. So there was no way that director could make a big to try and see only your face or only your feet, or no, you had to you were appearing as a whole person. You were part of the play as a whole person, and to convey an idea to the public, it had to come through the whole self. So Alexander is very clear about this idea that human being works as a whole and can only be changed as a whole. So uh, this may be difficult at first to understand, because to say it's changed as a whole, what does it mean? So Alexander is talking about the mechanisms, the mechanical mechanisms of the body. He often compare the movements of the different parts as a machine. most people object to that. They think it's a reductionism. But in Alexander's view, I don't think it is, because he considers that if you want to go on stage and impersonate a character that is not you, for example, you want to impersonate a person that is very tall, very organized, very patient, and you're a young man and you're none of these things. You have to create, you have to impersonate something that is not you, meaning you have to change. That's very clear. You have to change your habitual way of using the different parts of the mechanism. That's fundamental. And Alexander also knew very well that for working with mirrors, that when you start to impersonate uh, an expression that is not yours, that is not part of your habitual register, well, you may succeed. For example, you may succeed in showing a very settled, very organized person with everything in place. But in fact, you know very well that you feel absolutely distorted when you present something that seems absolutely symmetrical. It's so the importance of the feeling is more an hindrance than a way to, in fact, implement the change. You are going to feel absolutely wrong, but it will be seen by the public as the expression of balance, the expression of strength, the expression of ease in movement. So there is a very strange experience to be made here, is that you will discover that everything you do has to be consciously ordered. You have to you have to really implement decisions in the face of feelings that are telling you no, not well. This is like the person will feel that the back is rounded, that the head is too far forward, that the knees are too close. Yes, but everybody watching the scene will say, wow, fantastic. What an organization. So this shows that the person was not, well, Alexander, when he says conscious guidance and control, is talking of a guidance that is contrary to the feeling sense. And he says that conscious guidance is a new uh, it's an evolving part of the human mind. Before, he considered that there are two races, and one race is the people that are guided what is called subconsciously, according to their feeling sense, according to what they feel as right. Yes. According to, for example, if you ask yourself, what is equilibrium? So you ask a person to go up on the toes, and the person will be in a situation where equilibrium is more complex to achieve than when the person is sitting, is really flat on the feet. And suddenly, well, equilibrium is a sense, because it's quite easy to demonstrate that by feeling totally wrong and totally out of balance, you can stay much longer on the toes than if you try to follow what you feel, which for most people would be quite a surprise. And for Alexander, I think it must have been too. So that conscious guidance and control is not controlled by feeling. What you feel on stage is of no concern. It's what you express. There is a lot of the feeling side is not like smitted. It's not it's not that the person doesn't feel anything. Of course, the person feels and cannot help to feel. But what the person feels when impersonating a character with different habits, different deportment, is going to be of no consequence. And it's certainly not what the actor wants to show to the public. So conscious guidance and control, you have to always to come back to this idea that it was in fact originated by people, Alexander and some others, that were all involved in acting and all involved in a coordination between what the actor was saying and the physical expression that was going with it, the physical gesture that was giving something more to the lines. Because if you just say the lines, they will fall flat. Everybody will see that you're just saying lines. The idea is to be like a second nature. The character you are impersonating must look true to the public, even if you feel and if you have to really disconnect from the direct feeling experience that you have when you produce the gesture. Okay, good. So that is a start. It doesn't explain exactly how this idea came to Alexander, because really nobody knows uh, exactly for sure. I have some ideas, but for sure we don't know. There is quite a mystery around it because Alexander was absolutely not forthcoming about it. So conscious guidance is conscious guidance of the human structure as a whole. And behind this, Alexander found that all the different parts are moving to create a gesture, and all these moving parts are interrelated. There is a system in action and not a succession of different parts. So the idea of conscious guidance and control is not to start with, for example, organizing the movement while teaching the person how to move the head and the neck. And when the person is able to move the head and the neck, then we will go on the second stage where we start to move the shoulder and the upper torso. This will never work. And so conscious guidance and control requires the person two things. And these two things are not about physical aspects. They are about what we call mental aspects or cognitive aspects. Requires conscious guidance and control requires, first of all, to understand how the mechanism is supposed to work. And the second thing is to, in fact, start to consider the idea that one movement at a time is of no use, because that movement can only happen if all the other parts are already also moving. And if they do move in their habitual way, you cannot create a change by changing one part of the mechanism that is so busy trying to keep exactly as it is with all the other movements. So suddenly you enter quite a new world where we are not talking about exercises. How do you bend the knee? How do you orientate your head? No, we are talking about how do you command a series of movement at the same time, which means that if you want to command a series of movement at different time, well, you must have an idea of these movements before you start. So you must represent these movements, and you can only represent these movements one after the other. So, for example, I explain to people different mechanisms, and I say, when, for example, the elbow is moved outward, Well, it's absolutely obvious that the bones of the arm and the upper arm is moving with it, and also the shoulder blades, which is articulated with the bone of the upper arm, while the ribs and torso may not move in the same direction. This is a theory, and it's absolutely necessary for the person that wants to improve her expression, a general expression, to, well, test whether what I'm saying is real and possible, not only for me but for her, and she will engage into experiments. So conscious guidance and control is a method of cognitive experiments regarding movements. It's
So you've said there that the fact that he was a stage actor was crucial in the development of it, because they had to be able to project things consciously that they didn't feel. They couldn't go by feeling. He couldn't go by feeling. But it's obvious this is something that people use. You don't need to be an actor to do this, definitely not. And you don't need there. It's obvious that when we're talking about movements like this, all other activities of life that people are involved in, uh, this can benefit from this. So, d- is this something that people had before Alexander worked on this? Is
Yeah.
this a skill people had? How did it work before? Because he seems to be formalizing something that, or developing a pre-existing potential in people.
Yes. Well, in fact, I do think that conscious guidance and control was not formalized before, but it was used much more before than it is used now. Uh, I will give just a few examples. Um, every kind of workmanship was learned. I mean, the movements of the trade were taught to young people. People did not expect that a young person would in fact know how to use a chisel, how to use a any sort of tool that needs mechanical force, well, for hours on day after days, without paying a sort of penalty if they didn't know how to use themselves while using the tool. So every corporation had a training, and people had put a lot of thoughts into how to use different tools to obtain a particular result, and without endangering, of course, the worker. Because if you, well, if you start just to 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 refurbish a house, or to start to uh, do something that is really involving repetitive movement and physical activity. Like imagine somebody that is cutting wood day from the morning to the evening, or cutting, I don't know, crops or anything like this, bending down, a lifting objects without any knowledge. Well, by knowledge, what we mean intelligence in movement. We tend to think that people in the, for example, Middle Ages were more stupid than we are. Uh, I don't think that is correct. Well, if you read people that were writing at the time, you will find that, well, some of them are much more intelligent than we are. So why do we expect that people should be stupid because they haven't got an iPhone? Well, I think people with iPhone, well, I'm not insulting anybody, but I think that iPhone doesn't make anybody more intelligent than he is, or doesn't train somebody to be intelligent at all. While there are activities, I remember just one. It's just to give you an example. France has long been land where we produce milk. And so after collecting the milk from the cow, you have to carry buckets of milk. And there was a tool that you would carry on top of your shoulders. I don't know the name in English. And on this tool, you can, in fact, suspend the buckets full of milk on your shoulder so that you can carry very easily, like, well, 15 or 20 liters of milk at a time. It's really efficient. So during one of my workshops, I built such a tool. I wanted to show people that our ancestors may have been using intelligence in movements. It's a very simple experiment to make. You just need to in fact, uh, like sculpt a piece of wood that would can rest on the top of the neck, and on each side you hang the buckets with two ropes. And then I asked the person to perform a 3-meter walk with the gizmo, with the apparatus. Yes, and I put only half a liter of water in both buckets. There was water everywhere. After a few experiments, people discovered that in order to move with the bucket, staying in line and not going everywhere at once, well, there was a problem. They had to change the way they walk. The way they walk, well, the habitual way was absolutely not what was required in order to be able to just carry half a liter weight on each bucket. It was very, very strange. They discovered that they had to suddenly program themselves to start moving in a completely different way, and a more balanced way, of course. You know, they couldn't sway on one side. They couldn't throw one foot forward. There were rules. And if you don't know the rules, you can try, and you can try for hours or days, and you will not succeed. You will end up well, soaked every day. So there is this idea that there has been a break in the conjunction of intelligence and movement. Well, most people would say to you that sitting on a desk doesn't require any intelligence. That's correct. Sitting badly on a desk doesn't require any intelligence at all. Yes? If you don't understand that your manner of sitting is going to have long-term effects, well, you will suffer the long-term effects. So in the same way as to carry two buckets, you have to apply intelligence to the way you are organizing the movements, but in the same way sitting, and also the same way appearing on stage, and making will gesture look natural. They were obsessed with this idea of second nature. It's as if at the time the public was keen on spotting actors that were not acting natural, fake, or like bad actors. And the main idea for the actors was to, well, of course, combat stage fright. There is this notion of being subject to subconscious guidance, being at the mercy of your feeling is a big problem for an actor. It's also a big problem for a person that is sitting on a desk, but it's not as visible. It's not as obvious. Well, when you go on stage to perform, and play a character that is not you, suddenly um, anxiety and fright is a big part of the problem. Because to look natural, you cannot, have your teeth clapping together all the time. You need to organize yourself in such a way that what you feel is not really important in that sense also. So there is this idea of suddenly, instead of having the movement and the mood dictated by habit, by what I feel, what I'm used to feel, what I expect to feel, no. Suddenly there was this idea of freedom from oneself, and this was the aim. This was the in fact this realization that acting habitually, acting spontaneously, is a limitation. So Alexander was part of these people that wanted to break barriers. Well, most people do not understand it like this today, but at the time it was very clear. It's often I hear people say that thinking is we think too much. Thinking creates tension. Thinking creates unrest. Well, this is absolutely not the idea of conscious guidance and control. Obviously, we talk about intelligence. Intelligence doesn't create tension. Intelligence is the idea of adapting to special conditions and adapting in the best way.
And I think people often make the mistake of believing they're thinking when really they're just experiencing negative emotions and feelings and narrating some words subvocally to themselves, and
Yes,
think
that's
that it's really thoughting, not thinking.
yes,
What we're
that's
talking about
correct.
is intelligent thinking. It's different.
Yes, Alexander makes the difference very easily. He says reasoned thoughts, reason ideas in order to obtain an end. And reason means whereby. There is this idea that there are two kinds of thinking. There is a thinking that is flowing. You think about what you feel. Think about what you could have felt. You think about what you would like to feel. This is subconscious thinking all the time. No, no, no. Conscious thinking is different. Conscious thinking is, first of all, describing accurately what you're working with. What is the mechanism that is uh, uh, the means whereby you will produce what you want to produce. So there is this, there is the planning. Thinking is about planning. Because, of course, as I said, when you understand this idea that you have to perform different movements at the same time, well, you cannot describe the movements together. You have to describe the movement one after the other. It's only during the execution, during the performance, that the movement can be, in fact, performed together. That's the idea of rehearsing. That is part of Alexander, um, uh, well, theater wording. He says rehearsing the orders. We rehearse. And rehearsing is not thinking words in your mind. Rehearsing is saying them out loud. And when you do say orders out loud, of course, they are one after the other. There is still another job, is to project the orders. What we mean by projecting orders is that once you understand the mechanism, how the different parts can move relatively to the other, uh, irrespective of what you feel possible or not, then, well, there is the idea of conjugating or concerting, as Alexander used the word, concerting the activity of all the movements at the same time. At first, this may look impossible or frightening, but you just have to experiment. first with very, very simple series of movement, like 2 movements. So I propose my pupils to, first of all, see if they can really, that we say, understand movements. When we say understand movement, we want to define very clearly what is the part that is moving, where is the part articulated, what is moving relative to what, where is the starting point, and where is the end point that we wish? What is the trajectory to go from the starting point to the end point? What is the timing of the movement? What is the acceleration during that timing? So does the person accelerate very much and then slow down, or accelerate just a little bit and then go and then decelerate slowly? Well, there are many, many different ways to could consider a movement. And then when the person, well, has a good understanding of the 2 movements, we ask the person to perform the 2 movements at the same time. And when that happens, well, we can then control, we can then objectively, especially with, of course, with the tools we have today, with these cameras, we can see when the person is performing the 2 movement. Is the person performing the 2 movement and starting at the same time? Is the person ending the 2 movement at the same time? Well, that can be assessed, or that can be controlled, or what we say, a better word would say, measure. So this is uh, the idea of conscious guidance and control. But when you ask the question, well, there is Alexander's idea of conscious guidance and control, and how did that evolve? Well, from my point of view, I started as a teacher of the modern Alexander technique. I was trained as a modern Alexander technique teacher, which is a touch teacher, a person that knows how to sculpt the body of someone else. And I discovered that this approach had very little to do with conscious guidance and control. The person that receives the touch information is not performing any intelligent act. The person is just feeling something, and the person is told that what she's feeling, even if it feels wrong, is the correct thing. So in the end, the person is going to try and reproduce what she's felt, which is the definition for engaining, or the definition for acting according to what one feels. So I was really puzzled at the end of my training course, because I realized in the end that there was an enormous discrepancy between the technique that was described in the book and the modern Alexander technique. So I had to inquire. I had to, in fact, see if conscious guidance and control could really exist. If it was possible to teach oneself conscious control, because conscious control and guidance is a self development system. It's, of course, I am a teacher of conscious guidance and control, but when I say this, I say that I'm helping people to develop for themselves the technique of conscious guidance and control. I am not applying a technique of conscious guidance and control to them. I am teaching them how to develop that technique, which is different. So, um, so then, yes, I have to say that it was necessary to reinvent, in some ways, the technique of conscious guidance and control. So, what I teach nowadays is the result of my experiments, the result of my deep study of Alexander's books. And some people will say this is not the Alexander technique. Of course, it's you cannot find anything closer to the books that one I teach. But I am not Alexander. I don't know what exactly. So very often Alexander is elusive. very often is misleading. I think sometimes voluntarily so, and so it's just a matter of trying to find what it could be, and it's based on experiments. I am not teaching conscious guidance and control, telling people this is conscious guidance and control, this is the only way. I'm just telling people we could do a few experiments. You could see if you can direct a few movements together. Can you uh, can you try and perform a concerted activity that is defined in advance? And what it is you're going to discover? What are you going to feel when you do it? And what is going to be the expression of yourself that is going to be seen on screen? Imagine that you play with a few orders and suddenly you see yourself on screen perfectly organized. Well, so much better organized than you have never been before, with an image on screen expression that is really balanced and strong. While at the time when you're performing that experiments, you feel all crooked and tense and disorganized. What are you going to believe? Are you going to believe in what you feel? Or are you going to believe in what you see? Meaning, what it is you want. Do you want to feel as if you're stable and organized and on top of things? Or do you want to look that you are organized and on top of things? It's a question. Well, you cannot make the decision for anyone. The person has to experiment with that and to make a role. I have seen often people that would not want to continue with conscious guidance and control. It was, well, I think the plunge, the gap between their somatic ideas, their embodiment ideas that you need to feel inside what you express outside, was too great a leap, and to go toward conscious guidance and control and discover that our habits of physical habits and mental habits are just that, habits. And very often they are not conducive to expansion. They are not conducive um, to what we want really, because what people want to be free, people want to feel nice and to feel open to new things. And well, uh, it's very clear that there are different techniques, and some techniques are not producing many new things. If you look at the modern Alexander technique, how many new procedures, real new procedures, have been invented in the last 50 years? It's amazing. Very, very little. And so when you make that decision, it's yours, and you will make it on the idea that if a mechanism works according to certain rules, well, it doesn't matter what you feel when it performs. What matters is that it performs in that way according to the rules.
And this isn't just a luxury for us moderns to play around with. This brings it back to, you mentioned people in the Middle Ages, but if we go back even further, our furthest back ancestors, whatever else they were doing, they were experimenting and doing things against what they felt.
Yes.
So, right back to controlling fire, they would have had to have been conscious about what they were doing, but going very much against the terror of the new experiences. And this is something that's been constant with humans throughout evolution. And in modern times, we seem to have lost this, and it's more about top-down information downloads into people rather than teaching people an experimental craft that they develop for themselves.
Yes, yes. I think this is a great gift of conscious guidance and control, is that people are just taught how ways to develop their spirit of inquiry, develop their capacity to, in fact, explore beyond the limitation of the strict. Oh, I don't know this. I don't feel nice when I do this. Well, if I do understand, if I do reason out a an organization that is conducive to good functioning. I do not care if I feel good or bad when I do it. I just want to experiment whether I can first, yes, and whether I can improve on the, because at first, of course, if you start um, producing new gestures, new concerted gestures, at first they will feel so strange that you will certainly express something of that feeling. We are so used to expressing directly everything we feel that as soon as a person tries to concert 2 or 3 movements, the person will look tense, will show to the camera a sort of, of rigidity. Well, it's obvious. Yes, we expect it. And the idea is to see whether the person can make it look easy, can make it look, because it's just, again, a question of expression. How do you consciously guide and control your own expression? Very often, when you teach a new thing to people, they look like positively afraid, as if they were not going to understand. So their facial expression is representing something of what they think they can or cannot do without knowing if they can or cannot do it anyway. So that expression is not interesting. They are making people believe, and they are making themselves believe, that they have a problem with that. Why? There is no reason to do that. So when you receive something that is new to you, that you've never done before, you cannot expect yourself to be good at it. You cannot have a judge inside yourself saying, well, you're going to fail again. What do we care? We expect to fail. There is no problem with that. So there is no reason of having that expression. There is this concept in the books of Alexander that was developed not by him but by other people. But it goes around the concept of free expression. What is free expression? For many people, free expression is the expression of all the feelings you have. You are true to yourself when you show you're tired when you're tired, and you show when you're anxious when you're anxious. It's not the way Alexander considered free expression. Free expression is the capacity to express what you want for the best interest of yourself and the people around you. So even if you are slightly anxious, when your child is learning to do math and failing, for example, you give an exercise, arithmetic exercise to a child, and the child doesn't understand the exercise and fails. Once, twice, 3 times. It's something you you have to consider. What is going to be your expression? Are you going to manifest, to have a gesture that is showing, I don't know, impatience, anger, disgust, or I don't know, even fear? Is not going to succeed. Is that positive? Is that constructive? Certainly not, because you are going to communicate that feeling through the expression. Imagine you're an actor then. It's very simple. You think, okay, the actor is confronted with a child that is not succeeding, but the actor is not me. The actor is not. The actor is like nice and loving and interested in errors. So, what would be the expression? Can you? And so, some people say, yes, but you're not spontaneous. No, no, you're not spontaneous. You are. You are. You have a definite plan in mind. A spontaneous person has no plan. Yes. So reasoning is about making plans, and the plans are that you want the child to, in fact, learn by his mistakes. That's how we learn. And if you want to learn by mistakes, you have to, well, develop an attitude, an expression you want to have when you are facing errors, when you're facing doubts, when you're facing failure. What happens when Alexander is facing failures? He just continues. He just goes on. He just learns from his failure. So it's the same thing. So there is a need of a new construction of expression, and that is the idea of conscious guidance and control.
So some of this then is people develop these expressions. Is it to influence the people around them, or to even maybe make excuses for being unable to do things, or to avoid taking responsibility uh, for their movements, for their actions? So that they aim, and and you see a lot now in self-help world, or people who are interested in mind, body, spirit. They seem to want to get to newer, freer expression of their feelings, better feelings, and then they can just go with them now, and they don't need to make decisions. But that's not how it works at all.
Well, we are all confronted with that in different ways. We all have to, in fact, start to observe or study our own expressions and see how we can improve. So yes, I know that there are uh, types of development systems that is based on the exact opposite idea. The idea that yes, you this idea of freedom of expression that Alexander so criticized so much. Most people have completely forgotten that he was saying that, and even some Alexander teachers are exactly in this. So this is part of the construction of expression. So for us, it's part of the experiments we want to make, and we want to see whether we can, in fact, in different situations, especially what we call adverse situation, because it's very simple. When you observe a person that is not stimulated, you don't see the the real habits of mind of that person. It's absolutely necessary to be confronted with well, what we call difficult situation. Like, for example, the basic is balance, or the basic is feeling something that is not right. So you can engineer a situation very easily where a person is going to feel strange, a person is going to feel um, uh, not in a proper position. What is called proper means that is not according to what the person feels habitually. And then you observe what is happening, and the person is going to observe too. It's a self-observation, but it's not an observation in the sense that we observe how we react in the moment. We observe on film later to see how the person has performed. Very often, I have had some comments after lessons, and the person asked me, "Do I make that face and interrupt all the time?" And I say, "What do you mean, make that face and interrupt all the time?" And the person, "Yes, I make a face like if I was in the midst of suffering and resisting." Oh, you call that suffering and resisting? You mean that face? Yes, you do that all the time. Every time I say something. Okay. And do I interrupt all the time too? Well, all the time. It's difficult to say all the time. It's well, every well, I don't know, 15 seconds. And the person said, "I don't want to be that person." Well, that's a different thing, you know. Of course, you can start to organize your expression differently. That's there is no doubt out here. Yes. So expression is not just how I sit and how I stand. Of course, how I sit and how I stand is a perfect ground to experiment, because there is something I want to add about conscious guidance and control when we say that we cannot change but as a whole. Is that a mechanism? Alexander is considering mechanism. Mechanisms are, in fact, systems of parts that moves together to produce a function. So, for example, we will see there is is always coming back to something he called the mechanisms of the torso. And so, when you observe the mechanism of the torso, you have different parts that are working together to produce a function. So let's say at the very surface level of expression of what you show to people, you can show to people different way of bending the torso. You can bend the torso with the center of the torso forward and the extremities backward, which makes your abdomen protrude forward. It's the expression of outwardness, putting the belly forward and top and back of the torso back. But there is another way. You can also have the middle of the torso backward and the top and bottom of the torso forward, which is most people like a subdued attitude or slumping attitude, if you want. But there is a question: is where is the middle ground? Well, the middle ground is when you're not arch forward or arch backward. When the top, the middle, and the bottom of the torso are on the same plane. This is basic and simple. Well, experimenting with it is very interesting, because we will find that we are very good at the extreme. We are very good at slumping and arching. But how do we get to, the middle ground, the stable poles, the noble attitude that is used in the theater world? Well, was used in the theater world the century ago. So that is a very interesting question. At first, the pupil has no solution about that. He will discover that you need to feel things that are contrary to everything you felt before. If you want to align this spot, aligning the spots is very rational. Is geometric. Yes, you can have a perfect representation of the result you want to achieve, neither curving one way, neither curving the other way. Alexander called that the middle way. Well, uh, conscious guidance and control then is not a way to find the correct feeling in order to do that. No. It's about, in fact, starting to understand the movements that will produce that result. And Alexander doesn't use in his book the word movements that way. He uses like the idea of means whereby. The means whereby you can assume a centered or balanced posture is through the coordination of a series of movements. So you need to learn to direct these movements together, and it's possible. It's easy. There is only one thing that may block your advance is your habit of of feeling. If you want to feel like yesterday, or like the day before, or like you've always felt, well, that is not going to work. Because of course, if you start constructing series of movements reasonably and implementing them using your capacity of mind, well, then you will discover that, of course, the new organization that you're looking for, the balanced one, is making you feel horrendous. So that is very important to come back to this idea of mechanism in the Alexander technique, because when we say change as a whole, people must understand that we are going to use intelligence, but we are going to develop the mind tool, develop the capacity. For example, when we say mind tool, well, there is something that is quite clear, is that if you want to direct a series of movements, so several movements at the same time, well, you need to have the characteristics of the movement in memory at the moment you perform. And most people discover that memory is something they haven't really considered before. People think that people have memory or don't have memory. I have a good memory, I don't have a good memory, is something you hear. Well, there, in experiments, you discover that, first of all, memory is very dependent on what you experience at any one time. If you are anxious, you will find that your capacity of having different things in mind at the same time is getting lower, much, much lower. It's very simple to create that type of experiment. And the type of experiment is of no import if we cannot give the person some rules and some principles in order to overcome these limitations. The main principle here of conscious guidance and control is to be able to keep thinking reasonably, to keep a system of a number of different mental objects at the same time in more and more difficult emotional conditions. The idea is not to be able to perform fantastic when you are in a cocoon, a protective environment where there is no noise, there is nothing that will prevent you from performing. No, we want to be able to perform in a cafe where people are shouting everywhere and throwing, I don't know what they throw, tomatoes to the actor. Alexander must have found some situation like this in Australia, where the crowd can be a bit unruly, and the actor has to earn his, earn his money.
And this takes us back again to the history of this, and people, our ancestors in the past, had to learn, had to evolve this skill to be able to survive. And what we're doing is taking this potential skill that people use in some ways and developing it further and using it formally in all the areas of life, rather than just using it haphazardly in some places and not in others, and just hoping things turn out for the best, which clearly isn't working. So I think that's probably a good place to stop today, Jean-Do. Anyone listening and watching the video, if you check out the show notes, you can get links to Jean-Do's websites and to book a lesson with him if you're interested. And we will see you the next time. Thank you, Jean-Do.
Thank you, Kevin.
Bye-bye.
Bye.